What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. Today we have Mark Livesay on from Treeline Academy. But first, the Altitude Show is brought to you by Mountain Tough Fitness. And Mountain Tough, I started doing it about, 9 months ago. And it's a program that's specifically designed for mountain hunters, but anybody can find value in this. It doesn't matter what you like to do. If you just want to get your body happy and healthy for the outdoors or just life, Mountain Tough is the spot to go because they have programs. It's all app based, so you can do it from anywhere, your gym, your home, and they have programs specifically designed for all levels of people. They have the really difficult programs built for the hardcore backcountry hunters, but they also have programs like the minimal gear daily that's really challenging, but you don't need a lot of gear. You can do it right from your home. You don't need a gym membership, and just about everything in between. They have mental toughness programs. It's a really, really cool app. I hope you guys give it a shot. MountainTough.com, or just go to the App Store and get Mountain Tough app. That's MTN Tough app, and use my code DAVE20. You'll get 20% off your subscription, which is a huge help to you and a huge help to the show. The Altitude Show is also brought to you by GoHunt. GoHunt.com is all things hunting. So basically, if you are a hunter and you think about it all year like I do, you are either researching hunting, buying gear for hunting, or actually in the act of hunting. And GoHunt has created tools for all those things. For example, if you're on the hunt, they have maps, the mapping software, where everybody used to use just one specific company's apps. Now there's other alternatives. GoHunt is one of those. They have a mapping software that's pretty rad. But if you're planning for the hunt, they have research tools, the articles written by my friends Trail Kreitzer and Brady Miller on how to apply, how to actually hunt. They have draw odds. They have all kinds of stuff that are going to help you be a better hunter in the activity and out of the activity. So the other thing they have is if you're buying gear, they have a gear shop that they have all the best brands, and you can use my code Altitude for a discount. Why wouldn't you do that? So go to GoHunt.com, sign up, subscribe to be an insider so you have access to all the tools I just mentioned. And while you're there, go to their gear shop, buy some gear. Use my code for all of that, Altitude, and you'll get a discount. Mark Livesay, who's on the podcast today, just released a outdoor class, which is basically a master class on e-scouting and strategies for planning your hunts. He is the mastermind of all that stuff. I've never met anybody that's taken such a deep dive into the actual planning of a hunt. And his outdoor class will take you through all that. It's many hours of coursework, but you will walk away a better hunter. You should go to outdoorclass.com and use my code Altitude to get 20% off the subscription and to have access to not only Mark's courses, but also Remy Warren, Randy Newberg, Corey Jacobson, and many others. So outdoorclass.com, use code Altitude. All right, folks, today we have, as I said, Mark Livesay from Treeline Academy. He's the master, the ninja of e-scouting and prepping for a hunt. And we had almost 2-hour conversation. It was pretty awesome with a lot of good information in there. He's a good teacher. He speaks with authority, and he gives you he answers the questions that people ask before they were even asked. He's just a good teacher. That's what good teachers do. I've been to his seminars in person. I've been friends with him for several years now. I've had him on before, but before we talked about sort of his trajectory to where he is now. Today, we take a deep dive on all this stuff. So I hope you enjoy it. Go check it out. And also, guys, I'm headed out for the next few weeks elk hunting. I may or may not put out podcasts. Bear with me. But I'm probably going to launch some. But I'm out hunting, and this is what I wait for all year, and you probably will be too. So keep your ears open, watch your phones for more podcasts, but it might be a little scattered this month because I'm leaving tomorrow morning. All right, peace. Best of luck out there, guys. What state were you in?
Arizona.
It was muddy, huh?
It was muddy. Yeah, it rained and rained and rained, and I wouldn't say it rained and rained and rained, but it rained enough that, it's kind of like the Montana-Missouri River breaks when it rains out there. It's like there's not a lot of rock, and it's just that red, nasty, sticky, slimy mud. And in Arizona, when it rains out there, it like freaking floods, and the roads aren't really designed for it because it doesn't rain that much.
Mm-hmm.
So, it pretty much took all the waterhole hunting out of the equation, and that's a killer. And
Yeah, that
so
makes it pretty tough.
Yeah, so it came down to spot and stock, and I only had a few days. Well, I only gave myself 5 days. And I tried on several big bucks with using a decoy, but it was so flat, so wide open where I was finding these big guys anyway. And they were with, 15 or 20 does and stalking in on a group of antelope with a decoy in the wide open with no terrain. It was really difficult. They would let me get to about 100 yards. Almost every time I could get to within 100, maybe 125, but after that, they'd just be like, okay. And sometimes they wouldn't run from me. They just move a little. Just move a little. And 3 miles later, you're like, geez, I'm going to be chasing these things, forever. So it was fun. People are going to kill me because, this was a unbelievable tag. It's a 26-year draw, I think, for this tag.
Oh.
And I drew it on the random. I drew it on accident. I go for elk in Arizona. I don't give a crap about antelope. And I drew this tag on accident, and not on accident, but in the random.
Yeah.
And so I went down there, and I really didn't give it hardly any time. And I'm so excited about elk season, and I'm an elk guy, Dave. And I just
Oh yeah.
The antelope and me we don't get along. And
I swear they have like some sort of sonar radar, because 125 is a very common range on antelope. The number that sticks in my brain is like 118, 119, 120,
dude,
125.
right there.
They do. You can damn near walk that close. They're kind of curious, but there's a bubble, and it's probably just their bubble will like coyotes do that to them all the time, right?
Yeah.
But if they come any closer than that, they know they're starting to get in danger, obviously. So I feel like, man, over the years, if you can break that bubble, you've done pretty well. Getting under 50 for year when I first lived in Montana, and before I switched to a compound part-time, I spot and stalked recurve antelope every year out there. And I didn't kill one, but twice. So for 3 years, maybe 4 years, I did this. I think out of probably 30 stalks, I got under 30 yards twice.
Yeah.
And the problem is when even if you get that close, the next challenge is drawing your bow.
Yeah.
So a couple times I intercepted them by getting in a ditch or something. And I remember one time this buck came around this rock at 33 yards. I'm like, oh, I got you, buddy. Because that's close on an antelope. Good luck getting closer.
Yeah, exactly.
And dude, as soon as he came around that rock, he spotted the tip of my recurve, and he was gonzo. I think spot and stalk antelope, if you're shooting under 40 yards, is one of the most fun challenges out west.
Yeah, I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it, but I had elk on my mind. And
oh yeah.
If I would have not had this early elk hunt planned, I would have stayed, because the season went till September 7th. So I could have stayed for, a lot longer. And, but I was solo too. And antelope is just more fun with somebody else to hang it. And
it's a social event.
Yeah, it's fun. And but I'm glad I went down there. I learned a lot. I saw some big ass elk. I was in unit 10. You could tell people these units because, the chance of drawing a tag is. So the thing about unit 10 is there's not a lot of antelope, but the ones they do have are big. The bucks were big. The one I went after twice, he was like, the dude was like a longhorn. His horns were sticking straight out. And it was, oh man, he was a giant. And, but I couldn't get on him. 2 different times I tried. If I could have got him next, so the thing was, there's some junipers out there and things like that. And I was always looking for some that were on the edge, and they just wouldn't get on the edge. And it's funny you said about the coyotes, because almost every freaking group of antelope that I saw had 2 or 3 coyotes laying within 100 yards of them.
Yeah.
And just messing with them. And they wouldn't go after them. They just were hanging out. And every once in a while they'd get up and go after some prairie dogs, and it would get the antelope nerve, and they'd move a little. And so they were messing up my stocks as well. Even if I was having, some decent luck with them putting up with me, those freaking coyotes were just getting them up all the time and not, just not leaving them alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience. I don't know. Do coyotes, do they even have a chance of getting an antelope? I guess if he's like totally sleeping and not paying attention or what.
I don't know if they just wait for him to. They do eat the shit out of them.
Man, they were.
They must wait for them to obviously have vulnerabilities, whether that's like they're injured or, sometimes those fawns aren't nearly as fast as the adults. They get those probably pretty often, but I see coyotes. Same thing. That's why I said it, because
the
antelope don't seem to care. As long as it's over like 120. That's why I think humans can literally walk to 125 yards on most animals, unless they're like highly pressured.
Yeah.
I watched an old Eastman video a while ago, years ago. The old Mike Eastman video movies. Oh yeah. And he had a bunch of clips of him and Guy still does it, I think. If you walk not directly towards an antelope, but you walk sideways, like around them, it doesn't seem to bother him as much. I can't remember the exact details of it, but I remember him just like kind of paralleling them, and then you parallel a little closer, and then you parallel a little closer, and it's a good way to get in rifle range, at least, of an antelope. But they just have these bubbles. If you break them, they're freaking gone. And their eyes, I have personally, besides stone sheep, never hunted anything with the eyes of an antelope. Those eyes are just like the half of your head comes over a sagebrush bush from like 300 yards away, and they got you.
Dude, it was like, so the other problem I had was it was so wide open that when I would see them or I'd glass them from the vehicle, even to get started on the stalk, I had to park 1.5 miles to 2 miles away.
Yeah.
And because if I didn't, they were already dialed to you,
Yeah.
And when that vehicle stops, and there just was nothing to get behind, in Montana, there's a lot more pressure, and the antelope are a lot more jumpy here. And, but they're easier to hunt because, in my opinion, the few times I've hunted them here, there's a lot more terrain features and things like you talked about, the ditch and the rock. If you've got a decoy, I feel like when you've got that decoy and you're moving it around and they're seeing it, and then they don't see it for a while, and then they see a little glimpse of it, you got a great chance of. But when they just see that thing walking across the wide open, standing up vertical virtually, they don't like it.
Yeah, it's got 25% more legs than it's supposed to.
Exactly. Especially with me, I'm not exactly skin and bones.
Yeah, a friend of mine who's killed a lot of antelope with a bow taught me a long time ago, and I think it's the best tip, is like you don't hunt if you're spot and stalk antelope hunting. You don't hunt antelope. You hunt terrain. You find terrain that you can actually stalk in. And then you find antelope in that terrain, and you don't waste your time on, because a lot of these antelope tags for archery, guys try to stalk them in fields and stuff.
Yeah,
I just drive by those. I look for the one that's got like a hump or a rock or a tree.
Yeah, that's
and
what I tried.
Sometimes it might take you all day. And I've never been to that unit, obviously, but in Montana, you can generally speaking find one but a lot of times what happens is, so then I'll range the hump, and then I'll range the antelope, and I'll do the math to see how far they are apart. And it's usually like 120 yards, but you can at least get to the hump, and sometimes they'll get up and walk by you. Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to do. I looked in the tree. There was a lot. Again, if I would have had time, and the weather was getting hot again when I left, so they were starting. I felt like they were going to start concentrating around the water more, and even if you're not hunting the water, if you're around the water sources, catching them coming and going, that's where that terrain, if you could catch if you could get a terrain feature where you just feel like they're going to come by that on their way, I feel like that's a really good tactic, because when they get to the water, they are freaking on, they are switched on. Now in Arizona, there's only 30 tags, and this unit was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. So
Wow.
the pressure was, I never even saw another hunter. So
Wow.
I ran into one outfitter. We were signing in on this private ranch, and he was signing in, and we were going different ways. But that's the only dude I ran into for the whole week.
Wow.
So there wasn't a lot of pressure on him, but I enjoyed it. But it's time to turn my attention to elk now. So,
dude, you mentioned terrain features on the way to water. Last year I was in Colorado hunting with Brady and Trail, and they put me on this water. They got there before me. They set up a blind on a water hole. I sat there for like an hour and I got bored, and I just started spotting stalking for like the whole week. At the end of the week, I was spotting stalking, and I saw a buck with does going to my original blind. So I literally, there was no way to get to the blind without them seeing me. So I went and hid in the tall, there's a fence line by my water hole. I hid in the tall grass. I laid down next to the fence, and I let those antelope come to, it was 20 yards. They came to the water hole. All the does watered. I laid there. I put an arrow on the string. Buck came in last. I drew while I was laying down and popped out of the grass, and I shot him. And it was just ironic because if I'd have just stayed in that blind all week, I would have killed probably the same antelope. But instead I went and spot and stalked all week, failed, and then ended up shooting one on the same water hole.
It's funny. I did buy a new blind for this hunt because I kind of thought I might have to do it. I got one of those blinds that you can see through the whole wall. Have you seen those yet?
Yeah, they're awesome.
Dude, they're pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah.
I'm from Missouri, so we hunted blinds, quite a bit. But those closed in blinds with the little slits that they're claustrophobic. You can't really see things coming unless you're really looking out the windows.
Mm-hmm.
But man, having the two sides with that see-through fabric, I mean, you can't see great, but you can see good enough.
Yeah.
And I was kind of hoping to get to use it. But
well, that's a bummer, man.
For me, you better make sure you have a lot of audio books downloaded, and keep your headphones charged and be willing to set.
Brady Miller was telling me that on those long solo hunts, he doesn't have any movies, audiobooks, podcasts, nothing. He has nothing. He doesn't need it. I'm like, dude, my brain has to be consuming something. Otherwise, it's playing tricks on me. So I'm doing this backpack hunt by myself in Montana here in a couple weeks, and I'm already downloading movies because I know I'm going to be laying in the teepee at night, bored.
No, I just started audiobooks this year. I used to do it without it too, but now that I'm putting in as many days as I am, especially glassing, I have found that when I'm glassing, if I'm listening to a book, I can sit there and stay on the game for so much longer. And it seems like I'm more, this is a good tip, I think, for people. I've just figured this out in the last couple of years, mainly bear hunting, because bear hunting, you got to stay in the glass, right? Morning to night. You just have to. Mm-hmm. And it gets brutal. And I see a lot of dudes laying back, taking naps. And I mean, that ain't helping you. And, but those books, especially something you're really like Jack Carr books, right? I've listened to his books multiple times,
so you like the fiction. You like
I've got a mix. I kind of have a mix. Yeah. I do some nonfiction, but Vince Flynn, Brad Thor, Jack Carr, those kind of books as well. Mm-hmm. But I have found that I can really get into that book, and I'm just really methodically studying.
Oh, wow.
And it's been very beneficial to me. Very, very beneficial to me.
I may try that. The problem with elk hunting is you need your ears elk hunting, and that's why I'm always scared to listen to anything, because I'm always listening for a bugle or a pop of a limb or whatever. But bear hunting, or anything like that, mule deer hunting, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes, or even rifle elk hunting where you're not really listening for anything, you're just glassing.
Right. And I agree. Now, I don't know that I'm going to do it that much, elk hunting. I'm taking it mainly like you said, just to pass the time when I'm not, we're not engaged. And, when you're packing in, I'm going to use my llamas, of course, but when you're packed in and you're in the mix, you get a lot of tent time. A lot of guys that are coming from the truck every morning, they're spending their time, they got to sleep because the rest of their time is hiking.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're packed in and you wake up and you're glassing or listening right from where your camp is, especially bear season when the dark hours are more than the the daylight hours. I mean, most of you guys know this by now, but the equinox is coming up on September 23rd, and that's the day of the year that the sunlight is exactly equal to the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it starts switching. So right now, the daylight is longer than the darkness, at least till September 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just wrote an article. If you guys want to check it out, I wrote an article just recently came out on Go Hunt about the moon phase and the equinox and how they work together and how to schedule your hunts. And, I don't pay attention to the moon much. A lot of guys do. And I am not saying it doesn't play a factor in it. I don't think it plays one iota factor in the rut. I just think it might affect when they're rutting more at night on a full moon versus the daytime. I think there's maybe a little truth to that, but I am pretty glued to that equinox date. I think that if I only had 10 days to hunt, the 5 days before and the 5 days after the equinox would be the days that I would go in the field. And if that's the only days I had to hunt, somewhere close to that, it doesn't have to be that mix, but somewhere a few days before and a few days after, I think is a really good strategy.
Yeah, the moon phase thing is interesting.
A lot of people believe it,
Yeah, for sure. And I have friends that live by different versions of it. They believe kind of different things. I have a couple friends that elk are ruminant animals, and there's science out there, and there's actually a moon chart that talks more about not necessarily the phase of the moon, but actually the position of the moon, because certain positions of the moon, there's science that suggests that actually triggers ruminant animals to eat. So like when it's directly above or directly below. And I have friends that follow that, and it's highly successful. And they're not, these people are not not conspiracy theorists, but they're not woo woo. They're like, they run those times, and it's crazy how much success they find. And then I have other friends that run the phases, right? Like I've seen it work, but the things I always think about is like, there's so many other variables, right?
Oh man, temperature, all kinds of things.
Yeah, pressure, weather, habitat. It's definitely one of the factors, and it definitely has an effect on them. The full moon is the most interesting one to me, because people always say, this actually just happened 2 nights ago. Oh, it was a full moon. They were up feeding all night. Well, where I hunt, most of the elk are up feeding all night. I haven't seen. I feel like they're always out, or not always, but a lot of the time that's when they're out. That they're nocturnal animals. So I've always had a little trouble with the full moon thing, but I do think it affects. It seems to slow them down a little bit for some reason. You talk to guys like Corey Jacobson, and he doesn't even look at the moon phases at all. He just runs the same playbook over and over and over and over and over, whether it's hot, whatever. And so I try to listen to everybody's perspective and apply it. But what's your give us your rundown.
Yeah, so Corey is very similar to me. He wrote an article. I mean, it's remarkably similar to my theory. He, like you said, he's not a big believer in the moon phase, but he does pay pretty close attention to that equinox. So, what Corey, Corey's a caller. He just wants those elk to come to the call, and I love that too. And if that's your strategy, you need to be as hot of the rut as you can get, and for your odds, that does not mean you're not going to catch a hot bull on August 31st. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. You could,
right?
But it's an odds game. I always talk about playing the odds. The odds are higher. I mean, it's just a fact that you're going to encounter let's say a bull that wants to play the game on between September 15th and September 23rd than you will on August 25th to September 2nd. Now, there's a lot of things go into that. Early season, you can have a chance to get them before they get their cows, and maybe that makes them more susceptible in some areas. There's just a lot of things. And then, I have, but the majority of the cows, and this is just fact, there's really no arguing. The majority of the cows come into heat within just a few days, plus or minus that equinox date of the 23rd. The most cows. So it's a light. So, most people know this. It's similar in the whitetail world, but the rut is triggered by light. Yep. It's the amount of daylight. It's not the full moon. It's not the weather. It's not a lot of things. Now, that doesn't mean the bulls won't act crazier on a certain day. In an area with bulls and you've got a lot of cows, it takes only one or two cows to come into heat, have the whole place on fire.
Yeah.
But the odds are, your odds are just a little better they're significantly better that you're going to encounter a cows in heat closer to that 23rd. But like I said, I'm leaving tomorrow. I leave tomorrow morning for my first hunt because I like early season to target those big herd bulls because they don't have their cows yet, or they're just getting them and they haven't been pressured yet. They're very smart. They're 7, 8 years old bulls. Once they start feeling any pressure, they know the gig. And by September 15th through the 30th, I feel like they're hard to kill. Even though there's more cows coming into heat, they've already got cows. I've already been in a few fights. They've already experienced hunters. They're wise to the operation. And killing a giant herd bull using calling methods closer to the equinox is pretty hard. And it can be done. Killing herd bulls anytime is hard. But you look at the giant bulls, how many of them are killed by calls early season is pretty good. But they don't always come in bugling. They don't always come in screaming. They come in silent sometimes. You just got to, you've got to be ready for that in the early season. And the early season can be frustrating because you don't hear as many and you give up on spots and but you got to fight through some of that stuff early. But, for me, I'm blessed. I'm super lucky that I get to hunt, though. I leave tomorrow, basically, in the morning, and I'll be hunting until October 15th, pretty straight. I got 4 different hunts back to back. So I don't really care about the equinox. I'm going to be out there the whole time. And the only time that equinox come into play for me was when I lived in Missouri, and I was trying to time my hunt. The hunt that I really wanted to put the most attention, the 10 days that I wanted to put the most attention on, I did play games. I did really look at that equinox date. And like I said before, my prime times, if I had to pick 10 days, and this is in this article basically, is now I'll look at the full moon. Now, let's be honest. If you can find a year, and it just depends on the year because the equinox is virtually the same day every year, plus or minus 1 or 2 days, depending on leap year. But when that full moon, when that new moon or the dark moon happens to fall on the equinox, oh man, I think that's the prime time. Now, I don't not go elk hunting because of the moon. That's not it. But when I do have a dark moon that's close to the equinox, I do like the days. So let's say, for example, if the dark moon occurred slightly before the equinox, I'd probably do it that period. If it fell slightly after the equinox, I'd probably try that period. Now, if your vacation is just what it is, then I would do it. Guys, elk hunting is elk hunting. I mean, I'd rather be elk hunting than doing anything else, so who cares? But if you have the opportunity and you have the freedom and the flexibility to do it, then I would see where that new moon is, if it's plus or minus just a couple of days of that equinox, and then you kind of got both things in your favor. If there's a little something to the full moon, well, maybe you got that on your side. I don't think there's too much to bank on there, but who knows? What do I know? But I do know that I've encountered a lot of bulls on the you pulled it up. So
this year the new moon is the 14th in Montana.
Okay, so so this is what I put in my article. You can look at this. So if we're looking at this, if you're watching,
And for
this
those
on
of you that
YouTube-
are listening, if you got to watch it on YouTube, we have the moon calendar up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we're looking at the 23rd, which is about, not quite half, the waxing gibbous. So first quarter's on the 22nd. So, but if you look back, like you said, 14th is the new moon. So what's happening is, starting on the 14th, the moon is going to stay dark and start getting light around the 18th. So you got 4 good dark days leading up to that 23rd. So if I was going, man, starting around the 14th, all the way up to the 23rd, and maybe a couple days past the 23rd would be my pick. So if I had to pick, I would do the leading up to the equinox instead of after the equinox.
What day is what day is the equinox?
The 23rd. The 23rd.
Okay, so that's right here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So the moon is building in brightness from the 14th to the 23rd and ends up full on the 30th?
29th.
If I remember correct, 29th. Okay, the 29th is the full moon. Okay. So, I think a couple days after the equinox will be just fine, but I do like the moon ramping up.
Oh, and, interesting. It's let's see here. Hold on. I'm just doing Bozeman, Montana as a general spot here.
And it's pretty similar everywhere.
Right.
Slight differences.
The full moon is today or yesterday. The blue moon.
Yeah. So we're going to start getting darker now. It's going to start going dark now. From now till the 14th, it's going to get darker every night.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the 14th, it's going to switch and it's going to start getting lighter at night. Or, I'm sorry, the moon's going to get brighter up until the 29th. So it's really a good year, guys. It's really the full moon and the new moon is really working really well for the equinox. Now, the perfect world, guys, is and this happened a couple of years ago. The new moon was on the equinox. To me, that's the holy grail. I mean, that's like, I don't even know how often that occurs. I should look that up, but I guess the cycle is 14 days. So I guess every 14 years is what it would take, if that makes sense. But that's perfect. But a new moon that's within 10 days, I think ramping up to the equinox is really good. Because remember, the rut intensity just keeps increasing until the maximum number of cows that come in heat is plus or minus a few days of the equinox. So if you keep that in mind, it's going to get better and better and better and better during your hunt, starting on if you went on the 14th. The rut activity. Now, that doesn't mean the bulls are going to start running in more and more. That just means that the number of cows coming into heat, that's all that means. And
tell me what you think about this. I actually think okay, so it's strategy dependent, right? So if you're Corey Jacobson, let's use him as an example because everybody watches his videos, right?
Yeah. And he's a master.
Corey actually prefers that first 2 weeks. And part of it's because of what you said, but I think it's also like the less cows there are in heat. Like I've found if there's a whole shitload of cows in heat, it's so overwhelming for the bulls. It's actually kind of hard to call them in. If you're in an area with a lot of elk, if you're in an area with not very many elk, it might be different. But in those areas where it's like a true rut fest, let's just say there's 50 to 100 elk in a basin and, 10, 20 bulls, whatever. And everything's going crazy. Good luck calling one in. If there's, 15 cows in heat, like go ahead and blow your cow call. See what happens. Nothing's going to happen. But September 10th, actually one of my favorite days in Montana, and it's not because they're screaming their heads off, is September 7th, 8th, and 9th, 10th, right in there. Just right on the cusp of... Now, see here, Oregon, where I'm at, Mark, these bulls have been with cows. The Roosevelts, they've been with cows for 2 weeks now already.
Really?
That's over.
Well, so I've never hunted
It's a month ahead.
I never hunted Roosevelts. Yeah.
Like tomorrow when I leave for my Roosevelt hunt, it's basically almost like September 15th of Rocky Mountain elk hunting.
Oh,
like it's already going on. But those Rockies right around the 5th through the 10th, they're super susceptible to a heavy calling strategy. And they're more vocal later than that, but they're harder to call in.
Yep. So I agree. So like I said, remember what I said about I'm leaving tomorrow, and I wouldn't know if I'm going to call this my A hunt, but it's pretty dang close because I feel like the same strategy as you. There's not going to be as many bulls bugling. They're going to be a little harder to pick up on, but where I'm hunting is more open. So I'm going to be able to hopefully put eyes on them and get into the position with them and then cold call them. Because they may not bugle coming in, but they're very, very susceptible in the early season. The problem with the early season, if you're hunting an area where you don't absolutely know where the bulls are and you haven't been in this area before, and let's say you're going to a new spot,
right?
The early season is tough because you don't know the elk are there. They might be there and you just can't hear them. So one of the benefits of hunting later, like you said, Dave, is if you can hear them, you can put yourself in the mix. And one of my favorite strategies nowadays, guys, is, man, you get them bugling. You can get bulls to locate. And if you watch Corey's stuff, you locate a bull and he responds to you. If you've got a partner, a great strategy today with high-pressured elk is to keep your partner, stay back there, and every once in a while, keep locating them. And let the other guy go all the way in on him, silent. He's a lot more likely to stay put. For me, that's a good strategy, and that's a strategy we're going to use this year quite a bit, I think, because the last few years, I've kind of gone in on them, and they just get weird when you get close to them, and they start moving off. The cows move the bulls off, and especially when they start to herd up. But you can keep a bull going sometimes. Now, you do not want to locate this guy all back to back to back. I mean, you want to be as sporadic as you can. You want him to sound off enough that your partner can use it to sonar in on him, but not so much that you're going to freak him out. And if you feel like he's getting a little closer to you, you might even want to retreat a little. That's another good tactic is those bulls seem to, a lot of times, especially sometimes in higher pressure areas, they'll answer from a long ways away. They'll sound off, but they will not tolerate you bugling in close to them or threatening getting anywhere near their cow. So sometimes they do. Corey loves that tactic, and Corey's theory, unless he's changed it, is he keeps going until he finds one that wants to play. And if they don't want to play, he ain't interested. Yeah. But to do Corey's method, you got to be willing to put in the miles. That dude puts in a lot of miles and covers a lot of country to find the bull at the right moment that's willing to go at it and be super aggressive. So sometimes this lackadaisical approach can let your partner sneak in and, it's kind of spot and stalk, but not really. You're spotting and stalking, but you're using the audio to help guide you in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's a good tactic later on. Now, I have found early season. You tell me, Dave, what you think. Early season, I cannot get bulls to respond from far away. But what I can do, this is where I'll call more. I'll actually call more in the early season because what I have found is if you get within 100, 200 yards early season and they will respond a lot of times early. And when they do that early, there's a good chance they're coming in. But you've got to stay on your call a lot. And sometimes people just don't, it freaks them out to call that much. But early season, sometimes I'll do that. And I've had a lot of bulls respond. I'll call and call and call. And all of a sudden, I'll call one more time and I'm right on top of him. And he'll finally respond. He heard me the whole time, but he never responded until I broke into that bubble zone. And
I'll never forget a few years ago, Corey and Donnie came out here and they hunted the first week. And at the time, the first week in Oregon opened August 25th.
Oh, that's so early.
That week is like for Roosevelt's, it can be really good or really bad. It's kind of weather dependent. Usually it's too hot, and even though they're with their cows, they just don't care. But one of the things I learned that week with Corey, usually I would spend that week kind of just half-ass calling. Nothing too aggressive, maybe a bunch of silent herd talk, looking for a silent bull to come in. When Corey came out here, strategy was the same. Aggressive. And he got more bulls to bugle in that week than I would ever have. And I was like, dude, you call 10 times more than I do this week. Later on, I did. But see, the problem later on, same thing we just talked about, right? It's like, it gets, Roosevelt's, to me, after the 15th of September, Roosevelt's are very difficult to call in. They're still talking, but it's almost like early October Rocky Mountain elk. Anyways, he really impressed me with how many bulls they want to talk, and they still have the urge to talk. Like, it's still a natural. It's just there's not enough cows in heat to where everything's just chiming off, but you can still get them to get really pissed off, and they actually had pretty good success, even though we had heat. They called in some early bulls. It's all strategy dependent, right? Like this year, where I'm going in Montana, I'm taking a risk because I'm hunting in an area that the first 2 weeks are really good, but it's a pretty skinny mountain range, and the later the season gets, they just dive off on a private. But I'm going right around the equinox with the hopes I know there'll be less elk in the drainage I'm going to because they're going to be down on the ranch. But I'm hoping there's still a few mature bulls that just kind of siloed off a few cows hiding up in that basin. I'm going in 8 miles, and it's a pretty vast basin. I don't need there to be a lot of elk. And then I also know that I'm probably not going to call one of those elk in. I might, who knows? But if they're talking enough, I can get in there and kill them. And generally speaking, that's how you kill big bulls. Generally speaking, especially after the 15th. Like, it's just pretty tough to get them to come off their cows. So I'm taking a bit of a risk. Also, the later you go, the more risk you have of snow. And I don't care what anybody says, snow shuts those things down. Like, dude, and they change into their winter habits.
So crazy. So in Montana, you've seen it the last 5 years or so, we've had a couple of freaky snowstorms in Montana in September. Like crazy, 18 inches of wet, nasty snow. They were bugling, and that snow hits, bam. Now, what I did notice in that snow was the same thing I just told you. We bugled and got nothing. And all of a sudden, we walk another 100 yards and we bugled, and this bull just starts ripping right next to us because we finally got in the bubble. So I was going to ask you with Corey on that, when you were talking about him coming out there, did you see that tactic? Like, he would call not much. And all of a sudden, because he called so much that once you got in the range of that bull, that he felt like, okay, I don't like you being that close. I'm going to let you know I'm here, or whatever they're thinking. Did you see that, or did you hear, or did they respond from far away, or were they typically pretty close when they did respond?
Yeah, Roosevelt's have a pretty short bubble. So you generally speaking, you're not getting long off responses from Roosevelt. They're generally speaking always going to be under 300 yards from you, which is a long ways here. But yeah, no, like, have you ever tried to, I don't know if you've ever had a dog where you can make them howl?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I had a dog, my last dog, he passed away, but my last dog was a little beagle, and you could make him howl. Like, you'd be like, and you could see the urge start to pop up. Like, he would like almost start, like, almost like he wanted to howl so bad, but he wouldn't. And then all of a sudden he'd just be like, roar. It's like a natural instinct they have to howl. It's weird, but elk are no different. You're triggering an emotional response, so that when the Corey came out here, and he would hit that bugle 5 times in that same little basin, nothing. And then pretty soon you hear a bull just go, he can't hold it anymore. Like, you're just triggering that response. Yeah, and it reminded me of my dog. Like, if you hit them enough, they can't hold it in anymore. They're not really ready, but they're like, okay,
like, just gets them ready.
Yeah. But then,
it's psychologically tough. I mean, when you're out there calling that much, you're like, oh man, this is way too much. This is, it is, you know what I'm saying? It can be psychologically pretty tough. I love the story Corey tells about the guy that left a note. He didn't know it was Corey, and I don't think he knew. And he left a note on his car and said, dude, you bugle way too much.
That was, he got a note here when he was with me too.
So, but Corey just knows that if he does it long enough and consistent enough, that it's going to happen. And
who was on my podcast last? Who did I just have? I'm drowning. Oh, I had the Angry Spike guys on here the other day, and Corey Ford asked me, you've got to talk to a lot of great hunters. What's the similarities? And what I told him was, even though I like being a chameleon and shifting my strategy based on the conditions, the most consistently successful people that I talk to, generally speaking, have one strong strategy they lean into, and they just know mathematically if they keep doing it over and over and over again, they're going to be successful. And I think that to be true. And that's why I think Corey knows if he goes to enough basins, he's going to get an answer.
Yeah.
So, somebody else might go to one basin, not get an answer, get discouraged, and then change their strategy. But Corey knows if he keeps throwing that same lure over and over and over and over again, he's going to get a bite. It's just that lure works, right? He doesn't need to switch lures after 2 casts.
He knows it works. He just got to find the. So, I'm trying something. Like you said, you're going out on a limb. I'm also going out on a limb. So I'm not, that's one of the reasons I went on that. I decided to do that antelope hunt was I'm spot and stalking more this year than calling. And 2 of the hunts that I'm going on are almost entirely spot and stalk. And that's new for me. I'm pretty green when it comes to that. But you said, the guys that, these next level dudes, if you look at the giant bulls that are killed, I mean, the 350 plus bulls. Now, there's a lot of guys killing a lot of 300, 320s, calling them in. There's no doubt about it. But when you look at those 350s, 360s, 370s, they're almost all, I mean, when I say this, guys, remember saying almost spot and stock.
Yeah, but it's 95%.
It's high.
It's really high.
So you look at Lampers, Sam Davis, Brian Barney. These guys will dog those bulls. They stay on them. They don't make a sound, and they wait for them to make a mistake. Now, it's a patience game. It's a very tough game. It's a wind game. It's just being like you're just silent. You're living with that elk in very close proximity, and they're bugling, and it's, man, for me, it's going to be so hard for me not to pull my freaking bugle tube out. But these guys don't. And, over the past 4 years going to these summits and spending time with these guys, setting their glass and talking about it, I'm like, there's something to this. And
oh yeah,
I'm going to spend more time this year doing it, trying to do it, and see if I can control myself and not call so much. But I want to learn the skill. So I'm doing 2 hunts, and I'm going to be trying to do a lot more spot and stalk methods. So we'll see how it goes. And I know personally how hard it is, because last year, in order to kill that big bull, I had to do this. Yeah. And what I found was it's not, once you take the pressure off yourself to be like, I'm going to do this, and this is just what I'm going to do. And if I don't get one, then I don't get one. But you have a good tag. I know you do. And this is a once or a twice in a lifetime opportunity for you to be like, you know what? This is how I'm going to kill one of these big bulls. So it's just what I'm going to do. And if I was you, you may have to go to the extreme so you don't get the urge. Just leave the bugles in the truck. Yeah, I mean, my buddy, I won't mention his name because he's a private person, but he's the best big bull killer I've ever met, and I've met almost all of them that I know about. And he doesn't even carry a call, and he hasn't for 20 years. Yeah. And so I think it's a little bit less scary than I make it to be scary too. I feel empty if I leave the truck without it. Well, here's the deal. I think it's because
it's so easy to want to do it when there's nothing going on. It's like, well, maybe I'll just throw a call out and see what happens. I'll just throw a call out. But my buddy just sits down. He has more patience. It's a patience game, but it's also, here's the deal. Also, a lot of us don't have 30 days.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to get in that big bowl spot and stock game where you got to have time to pattern that bowl. Yeah, you might get lucky, but like last year I didn't have any other tags. So I'm like, I have a month to kill this one elk, and this is the only spot I'm going to, and I'm not going to make any big mistakes. But this year I have 3 tags. So I'm trying to move through things pretty quickly. Yeah. So when I get to Montana, I got to locate some bowls. I got to work reasonably quick, right? I don't have the whole month to focus on a bowl and target a bowl. So my standards change a little bit, if that makes sense. I don't know. Like,
no, absolutely. Well, this year too, for me, I have 2 elk tags, which is for me like a record low. I've gone as high as 6 in a year, and that was a disaster. I mean, I was so excited about having 6 elk tags. That was the worst year I ever had. I felt like
that's too stressful, right?
I couldn't even hunt a week hardly in one spot. And so that was too much. 3 and 4 is manageable, but you're still, if you're a caller, and that's what I've been most of my career, you can do it like that. But if you're, like you said, if you're going to play this slow play game and you're going to, like you said, your buddy, these guys like Ryan particularly, I've learned a lot from Ryan over the years, and they just live with those elk until they make a mistake. And they're quiet. They don't want him, like Brian Barney says, he does not want them to have any idea that he's even there. Not another bull, not him. He doesn't want them to know there's anything around other than what's around him naturally. And that's how they're getting it done. And but like you said, it's a next level patience game for that. And I have the time this year. So I've got 45 days straight. 45 days, 2 tags, 2 states, and limited numbers of people in both the areas I'm at this year. So the pressure, I don't think, is going to be huge. I mean, there's always going to be a little bit of problem with that, but not as much as normal. So I'm going to give it a shot. And I'm a e-scouting guy. You guys, that I don't like to go do boots on the ground. Now, it's not that I don't like it, but I hunt 4 or 5 states. You really can't do it. Right. But this year, I kind of broke my own rules, Dave. I have to admit, guys are going to give me some shit for saying this right now.
All right. I mean, I'm up for giving you some shit.
But I went over to this spot. I've been there 3 times already. And the first time I went was in mid-June, early June, and I saw 2, the 2 of the biggest bulls I have ever seen. And they were growing still. They were still growing, and they had to have been. I'm a pretty good judge, but not a great judge. But they were probably above 350 to 370 in mid-June.
Wow!
And these are 2 legitimate 400-inch bulls, and so I couldn't resist. I've been back twice. I found both of them 2 of the 3 times. But the last trip, I couldn't turn either one of them up. So I'm a little stressed about it. But they're there. I know they're there. They just were in the timber. It was pretty hot on this last one I went on. It was just a few weeks ago. But so I've done boots on the ground scouting. I know people are going to be like, you say all the time, you never do it. Well, I did do a little bit this year, so we'll see if it pays off or not. But I have done more than my share. I don't know that I've ever done more e-scouting and looked at country more than I have this year for these 2 hunts. So we'll see how it works out.
All right, so I have some e-scouting questions for you while we're on the topic.
Shoot.
What's your favorite age of burn?
My favorite age is probably in that 3 to 5 years. And I say that, I know you want an exact year, but here's the deal about burns. It depends on the steepness of the country.
Oh. Why is
If
that?
it's steeper country, then I'm more leaning towards the 5 years. If it's more rolling or more gentle country, then I'm leaning more towards even the 2 or 3 years. Because, guys, when burns are in steep country, the moisture content of the soil is less because the runoff is more. So it takes longer for the vegetation to regrow. A lot now, not guys, this is just generalities. In Oregon, where it rains at 24/7, that's probably not going to be the case, or Washington, right? So just keep in mind generalities. But here's the thing. The steeper the country that the burn occurs in, the longer it's going to take for it to come back. So look at the Frank Church, for example. In the Frank Church, those burns, they still haven't grown back. A lot of those burns still don't have that much vegetation in them, right? Because it's really steep. There's no moisture. It runs off quick. It takes longer for the vegetation to take hold. But you get an area that's got it's got some drainages, maybe even, a little bit of, lowland, more gentle rolling. Oh my gosh, that burn can recover in 2 years and look like just a green mecca of elk. So if it's rolling and gentle, I would say 3. If it's a little bit steeper and a little more rugged, I would say 5. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And the reason,
Do you agree?
I am not a fire zone expert.
It's one of my favorite. It's my second favorite place to hunt elk. Is a burn. It's number 2.
From what I've seen, I agree. But I've also seen it. It's crazy, man. In Oregon, I've seen it where it's really good the year after, and you wouldn't expect a goddamn thing to be there. I mean, it's just a freaking hellscape. But there's little sprouts of things popping up, especially bears and stuff like that, where the spring there's like little things popping up. But it's just, so here's the way I look at it, Mark. It's a little bit, not exactly, like a clear cut in Oregon, which I deal with all the time, right? Where there's a major habitat change and it sort of reinvigorates the ground to grow new things. Clear cuts in Oregon, before they started spraying, when they would burn, so what they'd do is they'd log it and then they would burn all what's left over in the ground. That next year would be really good when there's like those little green sprouts popping up. Now that they spray them, these clear cuts, because it kills everything for at least a year. But the second year, the animals start using them again, and for the next, so I'd say from year 2 to 5, 2 to 10 on clear cuts is really, really good. But I think it's probably similar to a burn. That 3 to 5 year is the best, right?
Yep. So I've read
new food.
Yeah. So I've read about every research study that's ever been put out on burns and elk, and there's a 70% increase. And guys, I like to look at the science too. I like to apply the science to my strategy, even though, there's always exceptions and there's always rules, but I like to play the odds games. Remember what I said, guys, it's all about the odds. It's not that you can't find the abnormality. It's not that you can't find that early season bull that wants to go nuts. So it's none of that. It's just an odds thing. And when it comes to burns, the facts are that the elk use a burn 70% increase in that 3 to 5 range. And then it starts decreasing there out to about 20 years. So they're still using it at 20 years. It's just less than it was in the 3rd year. So a 10-year-old burn could be fantastic, but the odds are it might have been a little bit better in the 3 to 5 year range. It doesn't mean it's not good at 5, 6, 7. It's just an odds thing. The research shows that they're like magnets. And so one of my favorite places to hunt elk, guys, I talk about this in my course a lot, is beetle kills. But the problem with beetle kills is you have to know what you're doing. You absolutely have to know what you're doing, and you absolutely have to use Google Earth Pro. There's no other way. You can do what you want. You can say what you want. It's just a fact, and it just can't be done unless you do boots on the ground, unless you know your area. And what I'm talking about is on a beetle kill. When the beetles first kill the trees, it takes about a year, year and a half, maybe 2 at the most, for them to wipe out the pine needle coverage, basically de-vegetation, where the sun can come through the trees, what I'm saying.
Yep.
Once the pine needles drop, you've got about 4 to 5 years where the sun is reaching the ground and the vegetation growth is incredible in a beetle kill.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start getting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on if it's spruce beetle or pine beetle or different type, the trees start to fall. They're dead. They're starting to fall. If there's storms in the area, all kinds of things, wind, different things will affect the beetle kill. But again, the research shows that in that 2 to 5 year range, the elk are like magnets to those beetle kills, where you're like, well, how do I know if it's a 5-year-old beetle kill or a 7-year-old beetle kill or well, you go to Google Earth and you look for the brown trees. When you find the brown, that's the year the beetles start to kill the trees. And you look at the date of that image. It's that simple. And you start doing some math. So let's say you look at, you've got your Onyx, your Go Hunt, your Gaia, your bait, whatever, you look on it and you see some dead trees and they've got limbs on them. They look like little snowflakes, guys. That's not a burn. If they've got limbs, it's a beetle kill. If it's a burn, the burn burns off the limbs. So you won't see the snowflake thing or the snowflake look.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the dead trees, you're like, oh, okay, that's a beetle kill. Well, how old is that beetle kill? How old is this image? Well, you don't know in those apps. Right. They don't tell you. So that's when you jump over to Google Earth Pro and you start paging through the historical images back to where you find the original brown trees, where the trees have a brown, dead look to them. That's the year that the beetle infestation occurred, or it started to occur. And then do the math, and guys, then it's money from there. And that's a great tip. I hope you guys pay attention to that, but that's how you can figure out, because, Dave, there is nothing worse than going to a spot and making a mistake on a beetle kill and it being like matchsticks. It's brutally. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a few elk in there, but even the elk start to use those places less and less and less, unless it's a high pressure area, a really high pressure elk area. But I have great success in beetle kills. What I've found in the beetle kills is that the elk are very, very comfortable in a beetle kill.
Mm-hmm.
There's still some shade from the trees because they've got some limbs, but the sun's coming through. There's a lot of vegetation. There's a lot of security cover. And so they just feel comfortable. And I found that you have a lot of opportunity to call and stalk elk during the prime time, meaning daylight hours.
Yep.
You're not gonna have as many problems with nocturnal animals in those areas as you will with more wide open type areas or more open areas. So I really like those beetle kills, but you have to be able to age them properly.
Interesting. Okay, so when you're like, let's just say you stumble across one of these areas that you're like, this looks really good, and I'm going to stay pretty high level with this stuff, but because people should all go do your course, which we can talk about. I've been through your physical course multiple times, like in person, and this is like a PhD in e-scouting. But let's just say that someone finds an area based off the parameters that you provide that they want to go to. What about water? What about campsites? E-scouting perspective. Like, how do you deal with that?
So, well, two different things. One, water is more of a concern for you than it is for the elk in most places, guys. I'm just going to tell you. Here's about
like planning where you're going to get, because there's some areas that look really good, but they're not even really that safe to go to because there's no water, especially when it gets into,
for example,
high country and mule deer and stuff like that.
I'm gonna give a little bit away here, but that's okay. I'm hunting an area. The water's a problem this year. In one of my hunts, the water is a problem, and this is. So if you're paying attention to this podcast, guys, this is a freaking good tip. So you're hunting an area that's got some water challenges for both you and the elk, potentially. Now, guys, water is usually more of a challenge for you than it is for the elk. I'm just going to tell you, because in New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada, those elk will travel 10 miles of water. It is not uncommon for them to do it. Now, you, on the other hand, have a little, now, so just keep that in mind. But I'm hunting an area where the water is a commodity this year. Well, I've got llamas, so I need to make sure that I've got some access to water for my llamas. Now, the llamas are going to carry my water. So the llamas are going to carry the water that I'm going to drink, because I don't want to drink that nasty, dirty, muddy pond water.
Right.
But here's what you do. So you look at your topography map, and here's the key, guys. You've got to look at multiple topography maps. Okay. This is step one. Because if you look at Go Hunt, you look at Onyx, you look at Base Map, you look at Spartan Forge, all of them, whoever you're looking at, you're going to see water, ponds, creeks, whatever is going to be different. Now, the creeks, not so much, but the water holes are not marked on some maps. Depends on the level of detail of your map. So in my opinion, the best map that you can use is the scanned USGS map, is the 24,000 map, is the actual scanned old school topography map. They have the best markings on them. Yes, the absolute best markings. So here's the thing, guys. If you're hunting an area where water is a problem, creeks and drainages are probably not going to have water in them. You're not going to have running water. You're going to be stuck with ponds, man-made tanks, that if there's cattle in the areas, those kinds of things, or the wildlife tanks. I'm talking pretty extreme water limitations.
Right.
But what you do is you identify these on your map, and then you jump to Google Earth. Like I said, remember what I said about the beetle kills? It's the similar tactic. So here's what I'm doing. In my hunt area, I went and found I scanned every freaking inch of this area. It took hours upon hours, guys, to scan it with the aerial imagery. I'd look at the topo map. I'd see a pond indication. I would jump over to Google Earth. I'd copy my latitude, longitude. I'd paste it into Google Earth Pro. I'd go to it. I'd zoom in close. Why did I not switch to the aerial photo in my app? Because they do not have the resolution that Google Earth Pro has. None of them do. Nobody does. I'm not dissing on any of the apps, but none of them are even close to Google Earth Pro when it comes to this level of detail.
Right.
So you zoom in on the pond. You got a pond. You zoom in on that pond. Well, what's your date of your image? It's 2020. And let's say it's June. And there's water in that pond. Well, of course there's water in that pond because it's June. So then you click the historical image. You click the image. Just keep your mouse in the same spot. You go back to the next one. Oh, this is August of 2000. 2015, whatever. I don't care what it is. There's water in it. Okay, that's good. Click back. July of 2014. There's water in it. That's good. Click back. September of 2003. There's water in it. So what I try to do, guys, is I page back through every historical image in Google Earth to see if there's water in that pond, every single image. If there is, then I have a pretty high indication that that pond's going to have water when I get there. So I will drop the water icon, but I will use a red color instead of blue. What that means to me in my custom markup, Dave, is that I have verified that that pond is very likely to have water in it. But then we go to pond number 2. We do the same thing, except we only see water in 2 or 3 of the images. Some of the images, like a July one, is dry. One of the September ones was dry, but there was water other time. I would mark that one with a blue. And what that means is there might be water there, but I'm not for sure.
Right.
And when I name it, I'll use a question mark in the beginning of the name. So what that tells me when I see it on my phone, when I'm in the field, I'm like, okay, I've looked at this pond. It's got a question mark. It may or may not have water. And I'll usually put in some notes. So, for example, in this spot where I'm going, I've went through and I've identified every freaking pond water source there is. And I'll be honest with you, Dave, half of the ones that I located are not on the topo map. And to be honest, none of them are marked. I just found them by scanning at the highest resolution, just flying over, doing flyover tours. And I saw them, and then I zoomed in and I tested them using the theory I just told you. So those are gold. When you can find a water source that's on no map at all, you might be one of the few people that know about it. In New Mexico, how many people hunt water holes in New Mexico, right? It's just a common thing, right?
Right.
I found a water hole in New Mexico on an aerial photo that was not marked on anything I had. And I actually had a list from an Excel spreadsheet that had the latitude and longitude coordinates of every trickle tank in the state of Arizona that's been built. I had every single one. And I had all the ones on the topo map. But this one, I found it just doing flyover. I went into that spot, and this was literally a quarter mile from the road. Quarter mile. There were so many elk tracks. I literally sat there. I killed my elk less than 10 minutes after setting down. They just walked right in. No, they have not encountered people at this water tank, I don't think. There was no blinds. When you go to a normal water hole in New Mexico, there's like 5 old blinds around it, right? This one did nothing. And all it was a small little tire with water.
That's
and it
crazy.
Had a solar panel, and it was a trickle tank that somebody had built that was not on any maps and was not on the sources, but I picked it up because you think I saw the water on the aerial photo? I did not. You know what I saw? I saw the solar panel.
Oh.
And when I saw that solar panel, I knew exactly what it was. I knew it had to be some kind of water, power source to pump the water out of some kind of seep or something. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I went there, and that's how it worked out. So I hope that was a long-winded, but that's how I go about testing water sources is once I identify them all, I work through Google Earth and I look through all the historical images that are available. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If there's 10 available, I look at all 10. And if I can find one that has water visible in all 10, I know there's a good chance it's going to be visible. It's going to have water when I get there. Because, Dave, like you said, you're hiking in 7-8 miles. You've got to have a reasonably good idea that there's going to be water there when you get there, right?
Well, and the just using this spot as an example where I'm going, like there's tons of water. It's more but there's a lot of still water, and I don't like drinking that shit.
I know. That's why you need llamas, Dave.
This would be a nice spot to have llamas. I'm not gonna lie. But more, I guess the second part of my question is, when you're like geeking out, okay, you've got your elk spot picked out. There's a water source for you. How much are you planning where you're going to camp as opposed to where you're hunting? And what's your math there? What's your science? Like, are you staying back half a mile and you're within a couple hundred yards of your water source? Or are you just making those decisions real time?
So good question. So, I just finished up my outdoor class. I have a next level e-scouting course that's on the outdoor class network. In addition to my e-scouting course that's on my Treeline Academy, site, but the outdoor class just came out a month ago, I guess, month and a half ago. But I have an entire chapter in there about campsites. And my strategy with campsites is I almost always camp downhill from where I think the elk are. And this is why. If you're really hunting elk, you should only be in your camp early morning and late at night. That's it. You should not be in your camp during the middle of the day. If you are, you might be doing something a little wrong. Now, unless you're hunting with your camp on your back and you're like lampers and you're just wherever you're at, that's where you get. But if you're setting up a spike camp, generally you're going to be out hunting, right? So I've got my llamas, I've got my spike camp. I will generally set it downhill and at least one drainage over, one ridge, one topography I'll tell you why in a second, but the main reason is downhill is because the only time that you're at your camp is the thermals will be coming downhill. When you're there early in the morning and you're there late at night, the thermals are going to be coming downhill. Now, if you're in an area where you got really strong prevailing winds, like if you've got a south wind that's just really strong, because remember, prevailing winds will dominate a thermal. Just because you've heard that thermals blow downhill in the morning early, that's not true. If the wind is strong, it's gonna counteract that thermal. And I also try to camp as close to the bottom of a drainage as possible. That's for the same reason, because the winds blow downhill almost guaranteed in the bottom of the drainage. Mm-hmm. When you start getting on ridge lines and stuff like that, weird things start happening with the wind. Different kinds of vortexes.
Well, especially if you have a prevailing wind, now your wind is blowing across the entire drainage.
So exactly. And so I try to stay downhill with my camp because I'm only in my camp during the downhill thermal periods. And the second reason that I put a ridge between is that stops most of the predominant winds. When you've got one ridge or one hump or one geography feature, guys, it doesn't have to be a giant feature. It can be, just a slight rolling of terrain. It can be
right. Doesn't take much.
Put something between you. If you do those two things, you're money. Now, when it comes to water, sometimes you just don't find the water like that. Sometimes the water just doesn't line up like the way I'm saying. So that's why I carry, I carry hydro packs. If I'm backpacking, I carry 2 or 3 4-liter hydro packs. Guys, these hydro packs are ultra light. They're super light. They collapse down. I take them empty so that if I have to pack the water to my camp, if you only have a bottle or 2, you can't put enough water in your camp.
Bad
very
idea.
Easily. So those hydro packs are great options for backpackers. For me and Lampers and Call, they use those things like crazy. And they'll just make a trip to the water, dump all their gear, make a trip to the water. And guys, that way, if getting to water's tough, and let's say you got to drop 400, 500, 600 feet. Well, if you only make one tough trip and you get 12 liters of water, you're good for a few days.
Absolutely.
So you're good. But for me, with my llamas, I use these MSR dromedary bags. They're like a canvas 10-liter bag, very tough, very durable. Mm-hmm. They weigh 15 pounds each, full of water, and I can throw those in my llama pack. So I just grab a couple llamas, head to the water, fill up those, come back to camp. So now, if I can camp by water, I'm going to do it. But guys, I don't camp by water just because I have to. I camp where I want to be like I said, I want to be very close to my elk, but not too close. And I want to be downhill with one geography feature between me. So be it. If it happens to be by water, so be it. But if I'm not by water, then I'm going to go get the water and bring it to that spot. I don't know if that made sense, but that's my strategy is I will transport the water to have a better camp spot. Because guys, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say one more thing real quick. I see guys do this all the time. If you are hiking 3-4 miles in the morning and the evening to get to your elk, you are not there during the best times. And now, if you're a badass, maybe. But if you're off trail and you're hiking 3 miles in the pitch black dark, and then you're staying until dark, until 30 minutes after dark and hiking back to your camp 3 miles, you're virtually getting no sleep. Because you're walking an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning, hour and a half, 2 hours in the evening. And think of not only are you getting there late in the morning and probably leaving early in the evening, you're the physical drain on your body. So I prefer to be really close to the elk, keep a quiet camp, stay downhill, keep that feature so that I can be to my glassing spots or to my listening spots an hour before daylight. If you want to kill elk, do not get there after daylight. Not 1 minute, not 1 second after daylight. And make sure you stay until the last light. Guys, I know this is going to sound familiar, but I've got a buddy of mine that Grizzlies and him, he doesn't like them. He just does not like them. Now, I'm not saying I'm in love with Grizzlies, but it's about 6 o'clock in the evening. Sun's just starting to kind of go down. You know, it's going to get dark probably about 9:30 now, I guess. By 7, he's like, you think we should start heading for camp? I'm like, are you out of your mind? Well, we got a long walk and it's off trail and, you know, we've seen all these grizzly trails. I'm like, dude. So a lot of guys are walking back to their camp during the best times. If you want to kill elk, guys, get there before first light and stay till after dark. Every day, all the days, no exception. If you do that, good things are going to happen to you. But if you get there at 9 o'clock in the morning and you leave an hour, I got to get back to the trail before dark so I know where I'm going. Learn how to navigate off trail, learn how to navigate in the dark, and your elk hunting success that's one of the biggest odds multipliers you can do. I see way too many guys leaving their camps at daybreak. They wake up, they cook some type of breakfast, whatever they're doing, I have no idea. And they start hiking when the sun's coming up. I'm like, what in the heck? You should already be at your spot when the sun comes up. Unless you're like hunting your way in or, there's some reason for it. But most of the time it's because they're just not comfortable, Dave. You know what I'm saying? They're not comfortable at night. They're not comfortable with their navigation. And that applies both in the morning and the evening. And unless you're in incredible physical shape, the wear and tear on a 6-mile day hike, not counting the number of miles you're going to hike during the day, but if you've got a 2 or 3 or 4 mile hike to get to your spot every day from a base camp or a vehicle camp or whatever you're doing, you're grinding yourself into the ground. And you're leaving so much scent in your hunt area all the way there and all the way back day after day. So I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of my approach to the camps. And how
great advice. The older I've gotten, when I was young, I was scared of the dark, like teenage, Dude,
everybody is. It's just overcoming it.
Yeah. And
everybody is.
I overcame it years ago. And now I actually love it because it's like an extra edge, man. Like I actually, and when I'm in areas or places where they're really talking a lot, I don't need to do a lot of instigating. I know they're going to be bugling at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever.
That's right.
I'm within 300 yards of bugles before the sun even remotely starts coming.
That's
out.
Right.
And
you know how many guys don't do that, Dave? You know how many people don't do that?
I get it, dude. It's creepy. It's creepy.
It is creepy. All you Oregon guys and you Washington guys, there's nothing out there that's going to get you. I mean, now I have to be honest. In Montana, in certain parts of Montana, you have to have a healthy respect. Don't be stupid. But you Washington, Oregon dudes, you have nothing to complain about.
Yeah, yeah. No, the moment you realize that, and you're right. I mean, for me, the most success I've had elk hunting is the last half hour of daylight. I know everybody has different theories, but that last half hour is my favorite of the entire day because those elk are fresh. That bull's been stoved up all day. Those cows have been stoved up all day, and they usually come out swinging, man. And I love it. Now, dude, I just had Roosevelts are a little bit different, so I'll put that as a context. But like Corey and Shannon were on here last week, and they're great Roosevelt hunters. They don't even get out of bed until 7. They don't leave their camp until 8:30 in the morning. And the reason for that is Roosevelts, generally speaking, don't move very much. And the most susceptible time of day to kill them, if you're not hunting in clear-cut country, is right in the middle of the day because you can really aggravate them. But that's just a little bit different than what we're talking about. Like in Montana, this area that I'm taking a risk on, these elk are going to be traveling down to agriculture at night. So they're traveling 3, 4, 5, even 6 miles sometimes every night. And they're coming up screaming while they're moving, screaming. And so there's no reason. I don't care how tired we all are. get the hell out of bed and get lined up. You can hear them coming up the hill.
Yeah, exactly. You use your audio to get lined up, and then by the time it starts getting light, you're in position, right?
Yes.
And
getting there late and trying to catch up, good luck.
Well, I was just going to say that in the mornings. I think one of the reasons a lot of people will say the same thing you just said, Dave. They have a little more success in the evening, and I would agree with that. In the morning, you're playing catch up. In the morning, you're always chasing elk, right? And in the evening, you can set yourself up to where they're coming to you. Very rarely do you get a chance to have elk come to you in the morning, except in cases like you're saying. You know they're coming off agriculture, and you're going to try to put yourself in position between them and the agriculture. The only problem with that is a lot of times when elk are coming off agriculture, that means they're moving uphill.
Yeah.
And when they're moving uphill early in the morning, the thermals are against you. It's a very delicate balance. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to side attack them. You're going to have to hit them from right. You can't be straight in front of them, or you're going to be in
that's
trouble.
Why my second favorite time of the day is 8:30 in the morning, right before this thermal switch, because that's basically your only chance to sideswipe them. Like right there between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, you have a moment where they're in the sun and you're in the shade, or vice versa, where you can get those little side thermals. Like it doesn't happen very often, and I don't. If it's not going to happen, I just let them go, and then I either will go get them in the middle of the day or at 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. But it does happen to where you can sideswipe them. But yeah, that is the problem. I think they have more advantages in the morning in this situation than they do in the evening. In the evening, especially early afternoon, they do make a few mistakes. Like I said, they start screaming before they move. Like you have an hour, at that 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, where that bull might start raking a tree. That's my favorite, is when they stand up in the bed and they start raking, and you didn't know exactly where they were, and now you know exactly, and you still have maybe an hour of up thermals where you can sneak down in there and get in position before the down thermals start. I don't know. There's all kinds of nuances and stuff, of course, but I like what you said about, because I've done that, man. Where you camp so far away, 3-4 days in, you're burnt out. You can't do it anymore. You can't. I don't care who you are. You're burnt out. You're tired.
So Dave, you're pretty lucky too, and with the number of days we get to hunt, and I'm 57 years old, guys. I get in the best shape I can get in, and Lampers always says, Livesay, you always hunt yourself into shape. I'm like, he goes, why don't you ever show up in shape? I'm like, Lampers,
what a nice guy.
Yeah, and so here's the deal, guys. If you're going to hunt, anybody a lot of people can get up early and grind it out for 7 days. You can kind of deplete yourself, and you can go home and get yourself back together, right? You can eat shit, you can do whatever, but you try to do 10, 14, 15, 21, or when I'm getting ready to try 45 days, if you try that tactic, you're finished. You'll be going home early. You'll be giving up. You'll be dejected. So I have a strategy to be as close. And also, guys, how many elk have you heard, Dave, in the middle of the night that you're like, oh, I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing in the morning. You're close enough that you can hear them, but not close enough to spook them, and you're in the game. You're in the game. But if you're hiking in and you wait till daylight to start, they're already done bugling by the time you get there, and you never heard any of the bugles at night. Guys, I'm just going to say this, the higher the pressure, the area, the more important it is to do these three things. You have to be there before first light. You have to stay until dark. You are not hiking 1 foot towards your camp until dark. How many guys always say, hey, it's time let's hunt our way back to camp. Hunt our way back to camp. No, you're not hunting your way back to camp. You wait till dark and you walk your ass back to camp. Do you know how many elk that you might hear walking in the dark back to your camp? Don't hunt your way back to camp, because that's just the convenient way to not. What you're saying is, I don't want to go walk in the dark. That's a code word. That's code words for I'm scared to hike in the dark, right? Let's hunt our way back to camp.
Yeah.
God. When guys tell me that, I lose my shit. I'm like, Oh, we're not hunting our way back to camp.
So true, man.
So
So true.
Stay on. And the next thing is like you just said, put yourself in position where you think there's some elk. You've heard them. You've watched them. You something. Put yourself within 500 yards of that spot and stay there all day. Sleep. Do whatever you got to do. I had a chance to kill my biggest bull to date with Ty Stubblefield 2 years ago because we chased a bull all morning and could not. Well, Ty messed it up, of course, like he always does. He messed it up, and I didn't get to kill it. So we were ticked off. We spooked him. We totally spooked him. But we knew that we heard a bull that morning. And we did not think it was the same bull. So we set up and just slept. We slept all day. We were eating snacks, just, whispering, chatting. I'll be dang, about noon, this bull lets off a bugle within 100 yards of us. He was right there the whole time. Dude. And I freaking made a bad shot on him. But if we'd went back to camp, we would have never had a chance at that bull. Guys, we wait 365 days a year to hunt these things. We love them. We think about them all year long. Do not let 1 minute of the daylight be wasted hiking or heading back to camp for lunch or whatever reason you think you got to go back to camp in the middle of the day for. Like where I'm going to go, I've already looked at the forecast. It's going to be 90 degrees during the day. It's going to be rough. So what am I going to do? I'm like, well, I'm not going to camp because I don't do that. I'm probably going to set a water hole if that's what I have to do. Now, that's not my favorite way to hunt elk, but I'm in the mix. There's a chance that a bull will come there. But let me tell you where there's no chance that you're going to kill a bull. Out on the highway, in your rig, in your camper. There's almost now. I guess it's been done before, but it's virtually zero, right, Dave?
Yeah.
But at that water hole, let's call it 5%, 10%. I'll take that all day long.
And you also, because you also don't have to burn yourself out in the middle of the day either. You don't need to just go randomly hiking and trying to.
That's right.
If you were in elk in this basin and they just shut up, for example, because that happens all the time, right? They shut up. You don't know exactly where they went. Happens all the time. But the best thing you can do probably is just sit your ass down, eat some food, take off your boots, take a little nap, listen to a book, whatever you're going to do. That's the other thing that I learned from my secret big bull hunter. I hunted with him several years ago, and we were hunting a ranch with giants on it, and we were on a giant. And it was screaming, and then it shut up like at 9 a.m. But it shut up like 100 yards from us. But we still didn't know where the hell. We didn't know where the hell he went.
He didn't run off. He's still there.
Wind was good, but it was dead quiet. I mean, it was like the woods were alive with elk, then it just shut off.
Yep.
What did we do? He sat my ass. I wanted to go walk around and find more, right? He sat my ass down, and he's like, we're gonna find a good spot with some good shooting lanes. We're just gonna sit here the rest of the morning. I'm like, really? Like, I don't know. I can get impatient in elk season. Let's go find another bugle. Let's go get one to fire off. He's like, dude, he's bedded right there. And we didn't end up killing him, but what ended up happening is we were sitting there for an hour, and all of a sudden I look up and here comes a cow, one of his cows, just feeding. She fed right up to us like 5, 6, 7 yards. And he could have just as easily been following that cow, and I'd have smoked him, right? We didn't end up getting that bull. We ended up getting out of there. But my learning was, and actually, Mark, ironically, that's how I killed that bull last year too. I sat my ass down, and I sat there for like 2 hours with elk all around me, but it wasn't right. And I wasn't going to go back to my truck. It was like 3 miles away. I'm going to stay here all day with him. He's raking his horns 100 yards from me. And eventually he made a mistake and I killed him. That doesn't always happen that way. But I have learned that. Like if you have a wallow, a trail, anything where there's any chance, your odds are better than sleeping in your tent.
Dude, that's so gold. I hope you guys are paying attention to that. And here's the last thing I'm going to say about this. One of the things that I teach in my e-scouting course and that I had in my outdoor class, I have a whole module in the outdoor class on this particular subject. I pre-plan my routes in. Okay. Meaning that I get on Google Earth and I find the most open, the best terrain, no cliffed out, and I draw a route into where I'm going so that if it gets dark, guys, it is a piece of cake to follow a route out. What's hard is coming out with no path, right? Use your tracking right on your phone. Turn your tracking on, follow your track in, and then you can follow your track out, right? And guys, your mind, when you have a track or a path that you've pre-planned or you laid it down on your way in, whatever the case may be, you are much more likely to stay till dark when you have a path other than like looking at oh shit, I'm 2 miles from camp. I got to find my way through the timber. I don't know if this is a good route or not. But if you know it's a good route, meaning you pre-planned it, you know you're not going to get cliffed out. You're kind of stayed in the meadows or whatever I go through all how to do it. And you know how long it's going to take. So one of the things I do when I do my routes is I run the Naismith principle on every single one. And what that means is you take the distance and you do 2 miles an hour. Now, again, use whatever your speed. If you're super fast, you might be able to do better. If you're super slow, you might have to adjust. But basically, on trail, 2 miles an hour, off trail, 1 mile an hour. And then you take that and you add 30 minutes for every 1,000 feet of elevation change.
What did you call
up or
that?
Down. It's called the Naismith. You can Google it. Naismith principle. Guys, it's an old formula that you can use. Let's say, for example, you got a 3-mile route. No, let's make it simple. 4-mile route. We've got a 4-mile route and we've got 2,000 feet of elevation and it's on trail. So 4 miles at 2 miles an hour. Okay, I got to give myself 2 hours and it's 2,000 feet of elevation. So it's going to take me another hour added on to that minimum. So I'm looking at 3 hours to do that 4 miles. So I know what time I got to set my alarm clock. How many guys, if you don't know that or you don't run that number, then you're going to arrive after daylight. Guys,
right. I
can't stress this enough. 30 minutes after daylight could be the difference between success and failure. I always use this example, glassing spot. You've got this beautiful glassing spot. You're overlooking this big meadow down here. You got a great vantage, but it's 3 miles up to this glassing spot, and it's 1,000 feet of elevation. So you know that it's going to take you, and this is going to take an hour and a half, and then it's going to take 2 hours to get there. And you leave with an hour. You underestimate it. You say, "Oh, I can do 3 miles an hour. I'll make it." Well, you arrive an hour after daylight. Let's just say that. Well, get up there.
You've burned yourself out in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you get up there and the sun's blazing and you're looking, it's still morning, but you're looking, there's no elk. You're like, oh, there's no elk. Guys, that big 400-inch bull might have just walked in the timber before you got there. These elk do not hang out in the open like that. Sometimes in the mornings, you've got to be there at first light. You just have to be. And you've got to stay on that same glassing spot, that same example. You've got to stay until you cannot see a thing. Now, a lot of times, guys, I will stay on a glassing spot. Because remember, when you think about a glassing spot, what are you doing? You're finding a spot that has the maximum view, right? Well, those spots also have the maximum audible. Those are the best listening spots, as well as, now not every time, but sometimes, the best listening spots as well as the best view. So guys, take your dinner with you, take your meal with you, set up there, spend an hour after daylight. You're going to be hiking in the dark anyway. So who cares? Who cares? There's no hurry. Stay up there, cook your dinner, listen for an hour, then hike back to camp. You might be shocked with what you hear.
I think,
but if you just okay, it's 10 minutes before dark, let's head out, you could have missed everything.
Mark, I think listening is highly underrated and not talked about enough, because when I think about especially when I'm alone, all of my senses are way more heightened than when I'm with people. And when I really pay attention to what I'm doing when I'm hunting alone, which is when I've killed most of my things, is
Me too.
I
by the
spend
way.
a lot of time listening. I listen so much, and I have really good ears. It's one of the only edges I have on an elk.
See, mine are terrible.
Oh, and
I'm getting old.
Roosevelts make a shitload of noise because it's so brushy. And I think it's one of their only vulnerabilities, is when they're relaxed, they are crashing like you can't believe. So you can hear them. But my point being, I think especially young guys in this whole, like, gotta, go crazy all day, 7, 8, 10 miles a day. It's like, man, sometimes and where it really occurred to me, Mark, that this is such an advantage is when I put a broadhead through my leg and I was stuck not moving for like a week. I still hunted. Dude, it was actually when Corey was here. I sat down and I'm like, well, I can't go anywhere, so this is the only spot I can go. Dude, next thing I know, I hear elk above me. A bear came in. I shot a bear. Like, I just was so much more keen on my surroundings. So now, to your point, when I get there before daylight, an hour, I'm out. I'm listening. After dark, I will use that as a time to just, like you say, you're going to hike in the dark no matter what. So you might as well be an hour after dark and not just
That's right.
when everything's moving. So you just stay there. And even if you need to provoke them a little bit to get them to talk, you can be like, oh, that's where that bastard was. He was down there. You know what I mean? You get him to, and then you don't answer him or screw with him anymore. You back out of there and you get back there in the dark again and find his ass in the dark and stay on him. It's just a highly underutilized tool. And I just wonder if it's because people are scared or lazy or hungry or tired. And it might be a little bit of everything. But to your point also earlier, maybe if you weren't camped so far away, or in my case, in Oregon, you're not backpacking. There's not really a point in doing that in most of these areas. So you have a base camp somewhere. But sometimes we're driving 2 hours, which is also stupid. Like, because that burns you out too. Driving 2 hours home.
Well, it's killing your sleep, Dave. It's killing your sleep time.
Mm-hmm.
So here's another thing, guys. I see guys doing this all the time, and I have to say, most of my career, I probably didn't really do this either. So I'm going to throw myself a little under the bus here. But guys, in September, the weather can be incredible. I mean, one of the great things about it is, like, I looked at where I'm going. I got lows of 60s, 50s, highs of 80s. It's going to be a little warm, right? Guys, throw on your puffy pants, throw on your puffy coat, and stay the night. Live with those elk. Listen to them all night. Don't go back to camp. You don't need to be in your tent and your sleeping bag all zipped up. And if you carry your stove and got your meal with you and you've got a little bit of water, stay a night. You don't need a tent. I carry a tarp, guys. I never go anywhere without a tarp in my pack, 24/7. Never. And last year I just switched to Dyneema tarp, so it's like you don't even know it weighs nothing. I can put that up and put my puffy, and I'm just as comfortable as I am in my. Now you got to find a soft place to lay, and maybe you don't sleep quite as good, but man, guys, you're in those elk all night. You're hearing them; they're moving around. You're pinpointing them. I cannot tell you how beneficial that's been for me. And I don't do that for nights on nights. I do like one night. If I'm there and it's just too good to pass up, and I saw elk at night and I'm hearing them, I'm like, I'm not leaving them. So, for example, Lampers a couple years ago killed a freaking giant Nevada bull, right? He literally slept with that bull for 14 days. He never left him. He never got out of vocal range of that bull. If that bull moved at night, he moved at night. He packed his camp up, he moved and moved and moved until that bull made a mistake and he killed it. So Lampers is a good example because most people think Lampers just runs ridges, he's super fit, which he is, and he can just go mountain to mountain to mountain. No, that's not what he does. Now, when he needs to do it, he can do it. But that dude is so patient and so methodical and so slow and so will stay on a glassing spot until he absolutely knows he's exhausted. The patience that guy has is unbelievable. And that's one of the reasons he kills what he does is we're always the grass is greener. We're always like, oh man, if I just went one more ridge, if I just climbed up one more this, or I just did that one more hard push, I'd be into elk. Well, you gave that example, that bull that bugled Dave earlier, and you guys just stayed put with that good hunter that you know. You could have spooked that bull by scenting up that area if you would have marched around all day. You could have ran that bull out potentially with your scent. So keep that in mind, guys, when you're hiking around all day. Now, I'm not saying there's not times, if you're not hearing anything, not seeing anything, not seeing no sign, you got to keep moving. But when you start finding signs, start hearing elk, start seeing elk, slow down. Yeah. You've accomplished job one. You can't kill elk if you can't find elk. But once you find elk, that's when you got to play the game. And that's when the patience switch has got to be turned on.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of guys just get they get grass is greener syndrome. And, a lot of the other things we talked about, they're just not there during the prime times. That's the number one, guys. If I had to pick one mistake that hunters make the most that I see, at least my opinion, is that they're not there at first light and they do not stay till last light. And now late season rifle, when they're out all day trying to get food, I'm not saying that that's as important, but archery season, when it's warmer and the temperatures and they're running so much at night, and those primetime hours are just absolutely mission critical to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree, man. How do people go check out your outdoor class? Because I think, dude, some of those topics we covered would be so beneficial to people.
Well, so everybody, I've gotten a couple emails lately. This is good. Thanks, Dave, for that. Hey, how different is your outdoor class from your East Guy? I mean, what's the differences, and are they the same? So believe it or not, they're not the same. And so the outdoor class is it's an hour. Okay. It's an hour and a half or something like that course. It's part of the outdoor class package. It's cheaper, but it's an hour and a half, but it is a lot of hunt planning strategies. How to do your hunt plan, how to plan your routes, how to identify glassing spots. It's a lot of planning and strategy. My e-scouting out course has some of that, but it's more about what the burns, the beetle kills, breaking them down, the water, the benches, the drainages, the funnels, the saddles, the 12 elk finding features, how to use all the technology, all the Google Earth methodology, the limitations, the basic needs of elk, late season glassing, snow analysis, all that real heavy duty e-scouting stuff is more in my e-scouting elk course, which you can find that at treelineacademy.net. Mm-hmm. And my new outdoor class is if you just go to outdoorclass.com, I think. Is that right? That's what it is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, outdoorclass.com. And I'm going to put in a plug because you remember I told you that I'm going to be doing some spot and stalk. So one of the things that I'm going to do tonight before I head out is Remy Warren's new bow hunt stalking mule deer outdoor class just came out like a day ago or 2 days ago. I mean, soon. I'm really anxious just to see what he says about stalking and kind of some of his theories. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm going to watch it tonight. And one of the great things about outdoor class is it's $99. And actually, if you have a code, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you'll put that in the show notes. If not, you can use my code too, Treeline. That'll save you a little bit. And then, but use Dave's. This is his podcast. And, and then it gets you access to all the courses, right?
Yeah.
So even though the course may only be an hour, you got 9 or 10 other courses for the same amount of money.
Right.
Now, my e-scouting elk course on my platform is about 30 hours long. It's intense, guys. Don't think you're going to sign up tomorrow and get it done in a couple of days to go elk hunting. It's just not designed for that.
No, it's a wintertime project.
It's a big project. Now, you could get a lot out of it, and it comes with a 2-year membership. So there's no hurry. You can do it at your leisure. So anyway, that's how it works.
Well, dude, I can't wait to hear all your updates from your hunts. And I'm stoked that we got to do this finally. We've tried a couple times.
I know. I had throat surgery. So my throat is probably the best it's been in Oh man, I don't even know how long.
Well,
Years.
dude, you sound great. You sound great.
Well, thanks. It's been a struggle. This was number 14, so I'm tired of it, but
Oh my God.
it's good. It's good now. So
all right.
Well, good luck, Dave, man.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
If you need me in Montana and you need my llamas, and if I'm available, shoot me a text. I try not to answer any texts in September because now here's the one guy. If I ever get a text from Lampers in September, there is no way in hell I'm responding. Because I know what he wants. It's like hey, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing? Well, what are you and your llamas doing? I'm like, we're hunting. Well, I've kind of got this giant elk down, and I'm 10 miles in. Do you think you can come over here and help me pack it out? So
yeah, I'm taking the Lampers model of I'm going to go in there and figure it out later kind of mentality.
Yeah, but, I like it. I like it.
I have a bit of a plan. I'll bring out a load. Good. I'll bring out a load, and luckily I'm only a few hours from some friends, including you. So keep your phone on, Mark.